Have you ever thought about making your own podcast? Is the only thing stopping you from making your own podcast money? Well, have you heard about Anchor? It's the easiest way to make a podcast, and one of the best things about it is that it's completely free. The creation tool on Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer, which means you can take it with you wherever you go. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and so many more. And one of the even better things about it is that you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership on Anchor. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app right now or go to anchor.fm to get started. It's free. So immediately when I mention the planet Mercury, you probably are thinking, oh my God, Mercury retrograde? Well, yes, but Mercury is so much more than just retrograde, all right? Mercury retrograde is one of the worst time periods in a human's life, of course, absolutely. I will give you that. But Mercury plays a special part in our life overall. You see, Mercury, the planet, rules our intelligence. It rules how we communicate. It rules our thoughts. It rules how we communicate our thoughts. Mercury also rules our childhood to young adult years, which means Mercury plays an especially formative part of our upbringing, becoming who we are. Mercury forms a big part of our core beliefs, our core thoughts of the world, our core perceptions of the world. It's not until we get into that Jupiter energy that we start to progress and expand past what we're taught growing up, or what we were taught to believe growing up, which is Mercury. Or in Mercury's case, what was passed down from our family, all right? And maybe what we learned specifically from our siblings, our aunts and uncles, because that's what Mercury rules as well. So, what type of childhood did you have? Because we have to think, we all have our own childhoods. My Mercury is in Sagittarius, so I had a very eclectic childhood. Um, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter rules Jupiter rules higher education. Jupiter rules our personal philosophies, our belief systems. It rules open-mindedness. Jupiter also rules long-distance travel. Jupiter rules kind of a gypsy energy. So that perfectly describes the childhood that I had. On one hand, and this is interesting because Sagittarius is the polar opposite of Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury. So it's actually in detriment or in fall to have Mercury in Sagittarius. But personally, I had this really weird experience as a child where I grew up in a very free-spirited home. Of course, there was some sense of structure. We went to church. But, in the home I grew up in on my mom's side of the family, we didn't go to church as often or as nearly as much as we did on my dad's side of the family, which was almost like living in a different world. And that can definitely be a Mercury and Sagittarius experience. Forced to form your own personal philosophies and belief systems about life. But as you grow up and grow older, because you have your Mercury in Sagittarius, and Mercury and Jupiter are both polar opposite planets and energies, you are forced to find your own way in terms of what you are, who you are, what life is to you. And thank God, I found my way, but it just may not be so easy for others, to find their way, depending on the Mercuries that they have. Any Mercury in fire sign, I would say, is someone, a child that had to find their way at an early age. Mercury in Aries, Mercury in Leo. That's a child that had to form their own beliefs, their own philosophies. It's definitely a child that had to, even the Mercury in Sagittarius as well, all fire signs are a child that had to form their own self-confidence and form the structure, the spine of their own self-confidence at a very, very young age. Too young, even. See, a Mercury in Leo, Mercury in Sagittarius, Mercury in Aries is a child at a young age that gets challenged a lot. All right. For example, a Mercury in Sagittarius will get challenged a lot on their beliefs and how they choose to live their life based off of their beliefs. Me personally, I got challenged a lot in terms of my femininity as a young, man, but I chose to present myself as a straight acting, guy. In the long run, it was contradictory to who I was, but people could see that. People could see that you're not totally living in your truth as a Mercury in Sagittarius. You have to remember those Mercury stages, that young childhood to young adult years, you're still forming, you know? But as a Mercury and fire sign, you're going to get challenged in that process of forming. Mercury and Leo, you're going to get challenged on your ego. People are going to want to knock you down to size. People probably try to knock you down to size, if you have if you had a Mercury and Leo. With a Mercury and Leo, you probably experience jealousy as well. Also, Mercury and Aries. As a Mercury in Aries, you may have found that you never really fit in as a child. You may have found that, your peers challenged you a lot. You may have found competitive energy around you a lot as a Mercury in Aries. You probably had an issue with authority as well, being a Mercury in Aries. Maybe issues with your parents. Depending on also where your Mercury is placed in your chart in terms of your houses as well. Or also if it's retrograde, because remember, planets can be retrograde in your chart as well. By the way, I am an astrologer, LAMARR Townsend Tarot. If you're new to my podcast, I do astrology birth chart readings. I also do psychic tarot readings. So check out my website, LamarrTownsendTarot.com, spelled just like my podcast name. All right. Also check me out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, LAMARR Townsend Tarot. Subscribe, follow me, and like my pages. So we have a Mercury in water sign. Growing up, things may have been emotionally hard for you. Maybe you had a situation specifically in your family where, it was emotionally trying for you. Mercury and water signs tend to be very emotionally charged in their thoughts, their communications, and in their childhood formative years, especially if you're a Mercury in Cancer, for example, because Cancer is ruled by the moon. The moon rules our family, the mother, the home. So you're very much connected to your mother, your family, and what you were taught and taught to believe, and what was passed down to you in terms of that energy, having your Mercury in Cancer. I will say the thing about Mercury in Pisces is that you, in certain cases, maybe didn't grow up with any type of structure at all. And that can actually be a detriment to Mercury in Pisces. And it kind of plays a part into Mercury in Sagittarius as well, because Sagittarius and Pisces are both ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter is all about expansion and not really having any rules, not conforming to any rules. But you have to keep in mind that also Pisces is mainly ruled by Neptune, which rules illusions and confusion. So whatever rules and structures there are in place, the lines can sometimes blur having Mercury in Pisces. So Mercury in Pisces children can actually be susceptible to things such as abuse, as well as Mercury in Scorpios. Mercury in Scorpios can actually be exposed to certain things at a young age that they shouldn't be exposed to, such as sex, drugs, things like that. So, and if you didn't experience these things yourself, you just kind of probably had an awareness or had experiences as a young child that forced you to grow up sooner than you wanted to. Especially Mercury and Pisces can have an experience at a young age that can kind of burst that bubble of fantasy about life or the world, Mercury and Scorpio can have it rough. Scorpios ruled by Pluto. That's all about transformation, death, rebirth. But I will say that the strongest kids that you will ever find are a Mercury and Scorpio, and probably the other one being a Mercury and Capricorn, or Mercury in Aries. Mercury in Aquarius is going to be pretty strong-willed too, as a kid. But I will say, let's just get into the air signs too, since we're talking about Aquarius. Aquarius can also be the type of Mercury placement as a young child where there's really no structure. Mercury in Aquarius is the type of child that can grow up in a very extremely eclectic family where there's like a sense of no normal or not the norm. So Mercury in Aquarius children can grow up in, for example, having two dads or two moms, or growing up maybe with the aunts and uncles or the grandparents instead of the actual parents, or maybe a Mercury in Aquarius was adopted or something along those lines. Ironically, Mercury in Aquarius and Mercury in Leo can also be the types of children who are like catapulted to fame and, kind of never really get to live out their lives as a child, like a child star kind of thing, especially Mercury and Leo.